Hey guys, welcome back to Trekyards. We're back and we're better than ever, maybe. He's Commander Cockings,
He's
and we
Captain
have
Foley.
somebody. Yes, I am. And we have a special guest joining us. We have Lore Reloaded joining us today. So, how are you doing today, sir?
What's going on, guys? I'm always honored to be on Trekyards, to be on the pinnacle of what is Trek for YouTube. Always a pleasure.
Who says that? Wow, thanks. Okay, cool.
He's sucking up. He wants something.
He wants to win this debate. He's starting
Exactly.
strong. Get the audience on
I'm
his side straight away.
buttering you up, getting
I
prepared.
know. You just told us what we're doing. Basically, we're doing a discussion, an argument, a debate. We're going to talk about something, and it's going to be controversial, and we're just going to talk about the pros and cons, I guess.
And a bit more of a pointed debate than we tend to have, which is why we like bringing Law back and getting more into the nitty gritty. And this one was again suggested by him. Sort of said it randomly, like haha, that's interesting, because differing opinions are really good. You know, at the end of the day, we've all seen the same shows in the same ways, mostly. That I mean, I love talking to people that saw Enterprise first. And it's like, oh, okay, wow. Or people who hate TOS, and it's like, wow, really? So different opinions are interesting. Not that I'm saying you're that radical, Mr. Reloaded, but why don't you give us the topic of today as I rambled there?
I mean, we kind of brought into it, but we're going to discuss First Contact and specifically the Battle of Sector 001, or the battle with the Borg cube. This is somewhat controversial on my side, and it's not a hill I would necessarily completely die on, but I'm of the opinion, when you look at the dialogue, when you look at the beginning of the movie all the way until they actually go back in time, I think that there's a good chance that the Borg cube was going to be destroyed. I think that a lot of the evidence we see, a lot of what we know of the Borg of the past, shows us that even without Picard's ability to notice that there's a minor system that can be destroyed when cubes don't have minor systems to be destroyed, even without that, the Borg was on its way out. And I'm more than happy to go into it if you guys want to, or if you want to give your sides of it.
Just a little throw in there. It could be a minor system specifically in regards to how it links to the Borg sphere, which is inside of it, because it has to have a specific, launch system, fueling system for the sphere. So therefore, that could be the specific minor system.
But that's counter to
but it's a unique,
the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but it's a unique cube. That one didn't have a sphere, so it's a different sort of cube.
How do we know the other one didn't have a Borg sphere?
How do we know it did? We can assume by canon that it didn't. We didn't see one. We didn't see any opening port.
No, I tend to agree with you. The ship was taking quite a bit of damage. It was only one cube, which, why'd they only send one? It's always kind of bugged me. Yeah, the launch of the Queen in the sphere was kind of an odd idea.
Here's some things to take into mind. First Contact happened during Voyager, and they took a lot of what we see in Voyager for this cube. This is not the cube. This is not the cube of Best of Both Worlds. This is not the Borg of Best of Both Worlds. One of the things we do know that happens in Voyager that didn't happen in Best of Both Worlds is that the cube started having shields, not subspace force fields that adapted. Maybe they had it, maybe they didn't. We don't know. But we do know that this cube is more aligned with a Voyager Borg cube, which has shields, than the Best of Both Worlds. Additionally, we know that the combat was occurring, I want to say, and I might be wrong on the timing, but it feels like it was multiple hours, given that when you take the Sovereign, how long it took the Enterprise to get back to Earth, we also hear during the combat, because we're listening in, right? And we know that they had picket lines. And we know that the Defiant and another ship would pull back to a different picket line. So what would happen is, based on that, is that there would be the Borg cube would come up. They would come up to some ships that would stop it. There would be some combat, fall back, till Sector 001, till Earth. And then at Earth, the first thing we see is the Borg cube just getting just savaged by a couple of, I don't know if they were photons or quantum torpedoes, but they make direct hits, and these hits matter. And then the next thing we see is Data saying that the Borg cube has been heavily damaged. The Borg cube also is... Well, I was going to talk to the pace, but pacing has never mattered. Kind of going to what you say, Captain Foley. I think the only reason we see one cube is because the Borg kind of work like computers. They send what a computer would compute it would take and nothing more. And they don't account for like the the Starfleet factor, which is to think outside and tech your way out of it. But that would be my explanation. We also, again, every time we see a Federation or Starfleet ship hit it, it hits it. It doesn't bounce off shields. Shields are gone. Those subspace force fields are gone. So it's taking direct damage, and it's not healing that damage. Remember that huge hole it had? It's not healing. It's lost its healing capability.
Can I jump in my first thoughts?
Sure. I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I didn't.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's all right.
I love you both on the same page. So I'm on a different page. You know, I've watched that scene numerous times from the siege, trying to pick out things. You know, when we did the saber, how many sabers? If you watch that battle, the Enterprise E comes in, and through just the passive them watching, we see multiple ships get destroyed instantly without anything else. So when the E came to battle, there's probably about 16 ships left, and in the 2 minutes between the E being there and not being there, they've lost already a percentage of the fleet. If the E had not been there, the Defiant was about to be lost. It was going to ram. The leftover ships would have been gone, just destroyed, because the weapons were obviously still at full power, at least enough to destroy ships. And none of the ships remaining were of a higher echelon class beyond, say, an Akira. And again, they're all firing torpedoes. The entire battle was damaging, but clearly, you know, sabers were going 1 or 2 hits and destroyed. The rest of the fleet would have been destroyed in minutes, in my opinion, given how we see those few seconds of battle. And since we're at Sector 001, and they are literally at our doorstep, the plan would have been fine. Picard got the best possible moment. Maybe, yes, they would have attacked, you know, Starbase 1 or something, you know, Space Dock, whatever. But clearly, they were at the very, very last bit of the tether. And you mentioned, you know, lack of shields. Well, yeah, in Voyager, we see torpedoes. There aren't shield impacts. They hit straight to hull. I think shields is a weird one. It's kind of like sort of shield. It's not, you know, we never see real bubble. We never see a shield bubble on a cube. It's always impacts. It's just implied maybe they are, you know, the hull, like an XO1, the hull is polarized rather than shields, but it, you know, different form. But yeah, that battle was in my opinion, like I say, we see ships getting blown up instantly, and there's only a few ships left. There was not 20 or 30 or 50 or 80 ships. There was not new ships incoming. That was not saying canon, so we should not assume any more. And since they got to the very last minute of, you know, 5 seconds away from Earth at sphere speed, every ship would have been there that mattered. That was the last step. So yes, the Borg cube was damaged, but it was totally functional, totally with both the tractor beams and the pulses. Everything was still firing, heavily damaged or not. It was still defeating the ships.
Now, do you think that the reason it kind of fell at the end was because it switched all of its resources to the sphere, and kind of realized that the rest of the ship was done?
Oh, it won for plot convenience. It won for Picard Ex Machina. This is the one spot. But I mean, that's fine. You know, quantums, only ship in the fleet have quantums of that. Well, I guess the Defiant would have used its quantums early in the battle, so they weren't using quantums at that point, so they were already depleted. But you know, yeah, it was just the one hit that was sensitive. They would have done the damage, but no one else knew where that was. It needed quantums to get through it, plus everything else. You know, it needed the entire fleet to shoot at one location with the ease bolts as well. And if they didn't know about that location, it wouldn't have happened. So, I you know, what do you think?
I completely disagree. There's a couple things to that. Just the shields for the Borg comes from dialogue. We when it comes to the direct impacts and things, we see that in DS9. That's I'm willing to just I know I'm all about in canon and what we see, but if they say they have shields and it hits, but we don't see the shield effect, I just assume the shields are there. They do that obviously for money.
Well, there's a difference between shield bubble and shield between Nemesis. You know, there is.
Sure.
So there's those sort of shields, not bubble shields.
Well, I would say that the reason why they had bubble shields is because it's easier to do on screen through an effects. But the shields that we see more with, say, the Sovereign or especially in Nemesis, I think, and we kind of see it even in the original series, that type of shielding where it sticks like a second skin makes more sense than a bubble. And I think bubble was more. Again, I don't want to get in the weeds on that. I just think that the reason why it makes direct hits is because of money reasons and things like that. It's all from dialogue that I get that. But let's talk about the actual Borg cube itself. We technically don't know that if that is the last stand or not. Going back to what you said, we don't know if it is their last stand. I would actually put more faith in space dock than you are, especially considering that it's heavily damaged, and space dock is supposed to be like this behemoth. And I think that they would have it set that the Borg cube would probably come straight at it, right?
Yeah, well, the problem is the sphere, which was in our current time, it flew at Earth, no Earth space dock. They Borg were coming at Earth space dock from the non-Earth space dock side, so it was not attacking the Earth space dock side. So that straight away, that's not in the battle. We don't see
the space dock.
No.
Can we see the space dock? Okay.
No.
But the Earth space dock is very tiny. There's you actually have to fly at Earth space dock to be in close enough range for it to fire torpedoes. Any other part of the planet wouldn't be. So they were obviously. I mean, if the plan was to do the go back in time plan, they just had to go to Earth. Doesn't matter where. So they were obviously avoiding Earth space dock just because that, like you say, I imagine that would be ridiculously armored torpedoes. That would be great. I'm sure probably at last stand that might have been effective. But then the Borg just wouldn't attack Earth space dock. I'm not sure I give much faith in Earth space dock's impulse drives to pilot it around Earth with enough speed to be able to get to wherever quickly. That's a whole separate thing.
Speaking of plans, if they're going to go back in time, why not go back in time way far away from Earth, where there's no fleet to fight through?
Well, no, they did that, and Braxton stopped them. It's because there's temporal... Oh, wow, that's actually a good idea.
Oh.
But there's temporal shielding around Earth because of all the temporal stuff built there, and therefore it stops interference with the 10th century there. You've got to go to Earth to make Earth work.
What is that? What is that from that I missed? The temporal shielding?
Well,
that is the most...
Well,
is that just a fan theory, or did you read that somewhere?
What do you mean? For what?
The temporal shielding around Earth.
Oh, no, that's just me being funny.
Oh, okay.
He's trying to be funny.
I thought you were pulling that from actual fiction. I was like, wait a second.
No, I
that
like
must have been a Voyager episode I missed. Right?
No, I like thinking things that make sense. And
See, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at it. The ship looks like that it is devastated. I have no issues with it still being fully operational because it can get 93% damaged and still be fully operational. So that's consistent. One of the few things. I don't know. I'll have to go back and re-look at it because I feel like Starfleet was doing well. Now I agree that the Borg is a one-hit wonder, so it takes out ships like that just going through them. But I guess that's just something I'll have to retake a look at and go over. What do you think Earth might have had defenses too? I mean, this isn't in canon or anything, but I would find it surprising if Earth didn't have its own defenses on planet.
On planet? I would assume, like in a lot of the games, you have phaser turrets and photon torpedo turrets, and of course the starbase space dock would have multiple phaser platforms and things like that. I mean, even in Starfleet battles, the bases have big phaser 10s, I think they're called. So I would assume that Earth would have some kind of defense system. I mean, I know in which one is it? The Best of Both Worlds, with the little Mars little drones that get picked off. The Mars
people describe those as fighters, like they were people in starfighters, is what people have said.
No, they're drones. You can ask
drones.
Rick Sternbach. He designed them, so yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad, because I would hate to think that they just sent people to their death for no reason. Because that's what I thought. I thought they were fighters. I'm like, why are we sending people to their deaths for absolutely no reason?
Yeah.
But
yeah, you would imagine that our whole solar system, right out to the Oort cloud, would be protected with different multiple platforms and different layers of defenses leading up to Earth. It wouldn't be like a last-ditch round Earth kind of defense platform.
This is Sector 001. This is the capital of the Federation. I get that you have this. Some people will call it peaceful. I will call it pacifistic type nature, where you don't want to be a warrior-like race. But it's not being a war race to have standard defenses in a way. The only counter to that is that space is three-dimensional, right? So anywhere you put a defense, they're just going to come in a direction. But given that this is Star Trek, they never do that, right? They come right up to ships like this. So you don't have to worry about that because we're in the Trek universe.
And can I just jump in one thing? So I've been looking at the clips
Sure.
of the battle. So Federation lose 6 ships. By the time the E appears to not appear, there's only about 7 left at the end as the Borg cube explodes. So they lose half of the remaining fleet in the last battle. And that was without them firing. So clearly that fleet is gone. That might not be the last fleet, but Worf was certainly willing to let that be his last battlefield, and So they lost a lot of ships. And I will say, yeah, Earth is weird. I mean, Earth should be the most defensible place, defensed place. And that's why you'd send a billion cubes. That's one of those weird writing things. I mean, we should have seen Earth space dock. We should have seen, all these things. Yes, they need a billion weapons turrets. But then again, things like, the coup that the dude did in DS9, if he then took command of the weapons turrets in orbit, he could then hold the entire, planet for ransom. So it's tricky when you put that power in place. At least Earth space dock can only shoot part of the planet. The rest of it you can not.
And ironically, that's one of the things that Discovery got right. When the Klingons were approaching Earth, you saw Earth space dock under construction. It's not finished yet, but there should be more defenses at that point, even. But yeah,
I tell you, the Starfleet, when it comes to military tactics, when it comes to
tactics,
a defensive force. It never makes sense. In the Deep Space Nine Operation Return, I recently did a video on this. They talk about being at the fighting at the Vulcan border. Do you know how far into Federation territory and how close the Vulcan border is to everything else? Not to mention it's a core member world, and they're on the border.
It's like a week warp 5 jump from Earth, so that's like a 2-day warp 9 jump. I mean, that's nothing.
And I mean, they're on the border. I mean, even if we assume it's the Vulcan sector and not the Vulcan space, that's still very, very close to everything, to Tellarite, to Earth. I mean, you're jumping. Everybody got upset about Beta Z. I mean, Vulcan was just more scary to me if they're that close. And they're pulling ships away from that border. Man, I would not have been in Vulcan at that point.
Yeah, well, again, the Dominion are weird. They had thousands of ships, and they could build bug ships like no one's business. I mean, that's why they were so effective.
Right.
They grew new people, grew new ships, in essence, easy to win.
It goes back to what you're saying. I mean, the reason the Borg shouldn't be able to be defeated, I don't think. I think as presented in Wolf 3 and The Best of Both Worlds, they should be a looming enemy that, if at all, comes on like once in a series and should always be something that has to be tech-teched away, that can't be defeated. That's their original design.
And the problem with the Borg is, too, when you try to say, well, in this encounter they did this encounter they had this weapon, this encounter they had shields, this one force fields. They're always assimilating new races, so they're always either changing their defensive systems or experimenting with them to enhance them, make them better. And maybe when they get defeated, they just assimilated a bunch of Packlids and got stupid for a little while. We don't know.
So we know they have millions of cubes, and the fact is, if you look, there might be cubes that have existed for 500 years. There's the entire gambit. There are cubes that might still be in the Gamma Quadrant doing its maneuvers, whatever, because they've got Transwarp Network. They can be anywhere. We talked about an episode we'll release at some point soon. You also had Hughes interference with the Borg, changing that was an instant perspective thing. A lot of people argue that's why the Borg Queen could evolve, because that trickled down, changed the hierarchical structure, all that jazz. So there's interesting sort of dynamic shifts between it being just a simple single mind computer matrix to more of an anthill mentality with something core in between the individuality. But really, so tactics, all the Borg do are, I guess, just fly straight at Earth, and they're not even staying at warp until they get to Earth. It's like, would you stay at warp until you hit Earth? I mean,
no, there's speed limits in the solar system. Even they know that.
Because surely, right? Best strategy. Oh, sorry, jumping.
No, I didn't mean I interrupted you. They're worried about the spatial anomalies past warp 5 or whatever.
Yeah, but the Borg shouldn't be worried about that.
Yeah, I know.
But simple things. You can only fire, apart from that once, apart from that twice, you can only fire torpedoes at warp. And so all you have to do is get point defense systems, which we see the Borg fire anti-shield bolts in warp. So there's no reason to assume they couldn't do point defense weaponry at warp. And then, imagine this fleet of 100 ships at warp behind one cube, just trying to pot shot each time it's just defeated them. It drops out warp straight on Borg, and then we see them, launch a diamond, and then it fires its nanoprobe spray, and then they win. Earth isn't difficult to defeat if you're the Borg. It's a story reason that it was what it was. Unless I guess they wanted to kill 80,000 Starfleet officers and destroy most of the fleet. Like, the Dominion weren't powerful enough. We'll just
exactly. This was during the Dominion crisis too. So God. I mean, whatever. Let's just get rid of. So Jesus. I had an interesting theory. Yeah. Someone mentioned this to me about the Borg Queen. That I don't think there's not canon that backs it up. I think, but it's an interesting theory that the Queen was designed for things like what happened in First Contact, to be able to be there and direct the collective when the collective wouldn't be in contact. So they go back in time. You have the Queen that directs the collective, because the collective from the future obviously isn't going to be there, right? And then it was a program, a thought that ultimately become corrupted and took over, whether they meant it or not, took over the collective. And the collective and the Queen are actually two different entities. We see this in Voyager. I forget the episode, but Voyager's coming in at one point, and the collective says, we've detected an Intrepid class vessel, or the Voyager, moving to destroy. The Queen says, no, don't destroy it, and the collective says, we obey. There is a distinct difference sometimes between them, which kind of gives that credibility.
Well, the problem with that is that we're trying to. I mean, everything we see in the show is a visualization of a concept.
Sure.
You know, like in the Orville episode where they're in the 2D space. I mean, you couldn't even visualize what that is. You can't visualize that in 3D because it's not a 3D concept. They had to. So a lot of those things, I think, are the creative. Okay, we've got to make something work. But you know, I would have taken that more as the latency factor. You know, the Borg Queen is just, you know, the running program of the, you know, it's got its own separate processor, and it's feeding all the information in. It's sending out the command that's been determined by the majority that it's also helping decide with, whatever, and then obviously the cube that's a million light years away says we absorb the consensus. There you go. You know, it was not so much. I never got a sense of her giving orders, because she's meant to be the Borg, so she is just a embodiment of a program, just like in the Matrix. You know, they are not. They're just programs. They're not people. They're programs within a program, but they're still a program. So she's just a 1 and 0 computer AI that happens to, like, you know, I love the idea of it being the individually controlling, you know, because you can still rip out the core of. I mean, the Borg at their heart are just, we assimilate new species to gain perfection. It's a one note rationale. And yes, it's weird when she's in her own context, but you know, they created Locutus to help deal with the humans as well, to help be a voice. Seven of Nine was one of many Borg that was allowed to have more of her own say to interact with humans. So you could easily argue that the Queen was allowed to be used in those scenes to deal with Janeway and Seven, because they needed, you know, yes, you could attach a binaural thing and have them sit down and there you go, everything's dealing, but it's more interesting to see them walk around with a Queen. I can imagine a lot of the time the Queen's just plugged in and not doing anything, because her purpose is the Borg.
Interact with other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That would also, I mean, we don't observe that latency at any other point to my knowledge, but it's definitely a valid explanation. It would also explain why we see different models of Queen, as we discussed beforehand. Like we see a different model in Voyager until the end.
Do you mean the in joke of it being Alice Krieg and then the other one? Do you mean the actor change, or do you just mean...
So the way I always looked at that, and maybe it's supposed to be the same Queen, and I'm out of the loop here. I've always just looked at it as a different model, because when you look at the two different Queens, they act not completely, but they act different from each other.
Well, one's in depth.
But it would make sense if you had one who was built for a specific purpose, like when Voyager comes and is starting to mess everything up because it's Voyager, and you don't mess with Voyager because it's just the destroyer of everything good. Then you also have the Queen, who is then in first contact. I mean, for different, like a combat model, a combat AI, that's the same thing. Yeah. It's just tweaked a little bit. And then maybe one that's an assimilation AI that's more meant for interaction. To try, because she tried to talk Locutus into doing everything, right? She tried to make Locutus.
Well, I'm assuming there's, you know, I mean, you remember that great scene from, that scene from Terminator Salvation, you know, the Arnie that we happen to see in the fight comes off a production line. Mm-hmm. Like there's just a cupboard of Queens.
Right.
I mean, that's what they are. They're just ready to activate when you need them. I've never thought that. I thought it was silly when fans argue, wow, but she died at first contact. How is she in Voyager? Because it's a computer program. Right. They just brought the next one out.
Well, and they talk about
a computer program, and even if it's been uploaded, the fact that she's got, although to be fair, she wouldn't have the memories of herself in the past, because that was she wasn't linked to the collective. But if everything is an instant data transfer, which I don't think instant necessarily is fair, slight latency, because that's kind of ridiculous, but whatever. Then, you know, you're updating the firmware of your own mental state to yourself in other bodies. But that's just the memory engrams of, you know, of data. Again, it's all ones and zeros. She's just a computer.
Right.
You know.
Well, and I always just wave my hand with that too, because that specific line, why do you think in such 3D terms, or however she says to Picard, I'm just like, yeah, that's Borg tech that takes care of all of that. And like you said, it would be a production line. There's no reason not to have the same model somewhere else or on every Borg ship. She might be on every Borg ship, just not activated until needed.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I can see that. I can totally see that. Yeah,
and it would make sense, right?
That'd be really cool, actually.
That way, when activated, if they come upon a species that they need the Queen for, she deactivates at one point and reactivates. Ones and zeros. That's what the Borg are. They're a PC computer. It kind of goes like, a lot of people get upset that they send one Borg cube, and why only one Borg cube? But just to go back to that, on paper, that's all it should take. And a computer is just going to care about the ones and zeros, what it says on paper. And so that's why I don't get as upset that they send one Borg cube at a time.
In all fairness, they sent 2 ships. Because the Sphere is also very capable. One Sphere can take out Voyager easily if they wanted to, So really, it is, if they needed it, it's 2 ships.
And yet tactical cubes can't for some reason, because...
Well, I don't know if we solved anything with this discussion. I think we generated more problems.
Yeah,
we need to have a more in-depth Borg discussion at some point.
I'm looking forward to being on the comment section for like 2 hours once this goes live. I'm going to be there, guys, commenting and replying to all of you. So definitely, if you're mad at me, definitely, because I'll be there. Just staring.
But since we've diverted so far from it, I guess closing thoughts, Stuart. Was the Borg cube going to be destroyed with the fleet if Hanna turned up? That is the topic of today's discussion. Closing thoughts based on all the arguments you've heard today, which have gone kind of all over.
I would say no. I think Picard showing up and targeting that one spot was the Achilles heel of the cube. I think they still would have launched their little sphere and done their assimilation Earth thing, but no, I don't think the cube would have necessarily been destroyed.
And side question, do you think Earth space dock, if it is armoured as we all assume it should be, could that, if that was the very last line of defence, do you think that could take it on and finish off as far as the fleet got to?
I'd like to think that their space dock's pretty heavily armored, but I don't think so. No, would have definitely caused some pains for the Borg, but I don't think they would have destroyed it necessarily.
Mr. Reloaded, your final thoughts on both those questions?
I still remain somewhat unconvinced. I think you've definitely talked me into that the fleet at that specific battle definitively would have lost. I think they would have gotten some more shots in. I can't see the Federation or Starfleet not being...
Oh, sorry. When you said that, I just realised. What was going to happen 5 seconds later, and we saw this in episode 8 in a sense, if Worf had actually done warp core detonation rather than actually just going into them, that might have been a hell of a last... a full warp core breach next to the hull.
Yes.
That would have done a lot, because every ship gets destroyed, but not... That might have been a game changer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, suicide runs with warp core explosions might have just done it.
Yeah. Might have hit his guys as much as the other, but we're not necessarily worried about other Starfleet ships at that point because we're trying to save Earth, right? It's a zero-sum game.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just...
No, it's fine. But yeah, I mean, I can't see Starfleet not being clever enough to at some point try to have space dock there in a way to at least get some pot shots in some way in. And I think that if space dock would have come up, we would have definitively seen the Borg cube destroyed. The sphere wasn't something I considered, but I think that probably would have been game over for them if they had been able to get the sphere out in time. Because at that point, as you say, they're at Sector 001. Even if they have another fleet, they have a depleted fleet. At that point, I would think Starfleet would be retreating back to the Vulcan, Tellarite, and surrounding sectors to make a last stand. So I think that they would have got the cube ultimately, but if the sphere would have gotten out, that would have been game over. So that's a good point. I didn't even consider the cube.
Cool. And I convinced people slightly. Unfortunately, it's an awesome damn scene, but it is a plot conveniency scene, But we know that, and I think we talked to, who we talked to about this, but they said, originally the plan was to be like several times more grand, massive fleets. Having only 13 ships with CG in the battle, and then you kill 6 in 5 minutes. Well, okay, either you had 300 there at the start, or you're really overdoing the strength of the cube, but otherwise you don't have a sense of damage.
I get why. I don't mean to interrupt you. I get why they didn't do it, but I would have much rather seen a 10-minute full-on
War epic. Yeah.
Starfleet versus Borg, and then you have the Akuras with the red weapon. I forget what it's called. That we put that in canon because I want
Chain
that so
reaction
much to be in
pulsar.
canon. Yeah, the chain reaction. I want that so much to be on screen. We have that. I would have rather seen 10 minutes of that than I could take 30 minutes off of the entire movie if they would have given me 10 minutes of that. In my opinion.
And you could have been even cooler. You could have started the movie with Cisco, the crossover event. He's leading the Defiant. And he has a 5-minute battle plan saying, Picard, emails him. I don't want to say email, saying we'll be there in 5 minutes. Have the scene, and then you see Cisco with his fleet of DS9 ships, raring, but even bigger than we did in DS9, and then you see Picard in the view screen saying, "Hold us off. All you need is 2 hours. Hold off for 2 hours." And Cisco's like, I still hate you, but I now respect you because it's been 4 years now. And then you start to see this battle, and then they come in. That could have been like a lovely little crossover moment to see how, although it would have detracted from TNG, but really wouldn't have. I think fans are clever enough to see that's just cool, not DS9's cooler. Well, no, it's just Cisco's
How about Starfleet not send the B team when they're fighting the Borg when it comes? I mean, I like Worf. Don't get me wrong. It's not a slight against Worf, but let's send all of our top officers, including Worf.
Yeah.
Stuart, close us out.
As I said, guys, looking forward to your comments and thoughts on this. Put it in the comments section below. There you go. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out more conversations like this. We're going to have Mr. Lore Reloaded joining us again, I am sure. Please check him out. Check out his different in his channel. Want to pitch your channel for us there so they know where to go?
You guys can find me at youtube.com/Lore Reloaded. I've said it before. If you like me just discussing the technical backgrounds and things like that, if you like a more relaxed commentator that's knowledgeable on Star Trek versus the epic geniuses on Trekyards, you'll definitely enjoy the show. So take a look, youtube.com/Lore Reloaded, or tell me how much you hate my channel at twitter.com/Lore Reloaded.
That's right. So I guess until next time, guys, I'm Captain Foley.
I am Commander Hungs.
I am Lore Reloaded.
See you in the future.
Bye, guys.